Welcome to the Soberish Uprising. My name is Holly Crevo, a former heavy drinker who started a Soberish Uprising of her own almost 2 years ago, and everything in her life has changed. On the Soberish Uprising, we tell stories of finding freedom from alcohol on our terms with no judgment, guilt, and just looking for pure freedom. Today, I am joined by April, who is a mutual friend who we met through a mutual friend.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. We also are both in the coaching space. You work on mindfulness and somatic healing, which we will be getting into in this conversation. So, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be part of it.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, tell me, it's always like when you think about, you had reached out wanting to share your soberish journey. Tell me, maybe currently, and then we'll get into like all the stories.
Yeah.
What is your relationship with alcohol currently?
Yeah. So my relationship to alcohol, I love, first of all, I just love the term soberish.
Mm.
um, because it's like it widens it
Mm.
widens the view. It takes us out of the sort of binary of choice around alcohol and where it slots. But my relationship to alcohol is I don't drink currently. And I haven't had, I think the last drink I had was in 2017. I don't have like a marker exactly. It's like
Okay.
October-ish,
Yeah.
October-ish of 2017. Um, but I do drink like mocktails
Mhm.
and, I've gotten into some of the kind of uh, fake bourbons and,
Mhm,
making
mhm.
mocktails in that way. So I have a healthy relationship to sort of the ritual of
Ooh,
the
yeah.
idea of sitting and having something to share, but I choose not to partake in the alcohol part of that equation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ooh, tell me
yeah.
about the ritual piece, because that's something I hear a lot of, something I've struggled with, right? Thinking if I
Mm,
don't drink, like, can I enjoy a patio with my spouse? Can I enjoy happy
yeah.
hour? So tell me, like, what was that transition like for you to go from drinking to like that exploring the ritual of
So
drinking?
not, yeah. I think I started with the club soda and lime, which I
Yeah.
probably a lot of people do because like when you go out with others, like you want to have something in your hand,
Mm, mhm.
and it's so I would get a club soda with lime, and it always felt a little bit weird when some bars will give you like the giant glass versus
Yes.
the
Yes.
cocktail glass, and then it was like so clearly obvious you were drinking like
Mhm.
water and not, but you could if so I started asking when I ordered, I'm like, can you give it to me in a cocktail glass?
Yeah.
And I realized that people were drinking and one or two drinks in, nobody cares. No one cares that you are drinking or not drinking, but when there's more attention drawn to it, like
Mhm.
it's in a red tumbler or something, they're like, oh, it's more conversation. But if you had it
Yeah.
in a cocktail glass, like no one cares. So I
Yes.
sort of transitioned in that way.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I think at home I just didn't really do anything. And
Yeah.
then um, over the course of the pandemic, which I remember thinking, well, this is an interesting time to choose not to drink. And if I'm
Yeah.
like, if I'm going to be home coping with this, all of the pressures of the world, like you'd think now would be the time to have a cocktail. So I kept like checking in with myself, like, am I good? Is this good? Am I cool here?
Yeah.
Like, do I, where am I with it? Um, but I started getting ads, I think, in the past year or so
Mm.
for like different kinds of mocktail type, drinks. And I have a lot of allergies. And so I would always be emailing those
Mhm.
companies and asking what was in it. But I found a few that I just sort of did a taste test of some of the fake bourbons. But and it made me kind of feel like I could sit on the couch with my husband and he'd have
Yeah.
a bourbon and I'd have my, mocktail bourbon, and it felt like something like I
Yeah.
was like doing something other than drinking, water or
Yeah.
seltzer, what have you. So it kind of felt
Mhm.
nice to dress something up and make
Mm.
it and have a moment, take a moment
Yeah,
with
yeah.
something that's different than the norm.
I love that because that's what it's all about, right? Is like just that's what we're seeking is that moment, like on the couch with a spouse or with friends.
Yeah,
And yeah, and pro tip, always ask for the type of glass you want at a restaurant. I'm always like, I want a wine
exactly.
glass with my sparkling water or with my alcohol-free beer or whatever that is. I'm always very
Yeah.
particular because yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
get that
learned
like
that.
that red plastic one. You're like, oh, like with a straw. You're like, I don't want that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing where you're at now, since 2017, maybe like start back to when did you start to really say, hey, maybe this drinking isn't working for me anymore? When was
Yeah.
that moment?
I think I had a couple. I'm going to start from the more recent thing and work backwards. I have autoimmune disease. I have Lyme disease. And from 2014 to about 2017, I was going through a lot of different medical treatments and some intensive medical things. And on most medical treatments, it doesn't say, go ahead and drink with that, whatever it is you're taking or, whatever treatment. It's usually contraindicated.
Yeah.
Whether we pay attention to that or not is different. But I was feeling like shit. I don't know if we can say that, but I was feeling like shit. All right, cool.
Yeah.
I was feeling like shit. And, having a cocktail was like a way of coping with feeling like shit as well. But then it would compound it. And I just was really struggling to wake up and feel well. And so, when I wasn't having a cocktail or I wasn't drinking, I was like, okay, it's a little more bearable. It was still hard to wake up in a body that was not well. And so I became hyper aware of the choice, that it was a choice point of that my choice to drink would dictate to some degree how I was going to feel the next day.
Before that, what did that drink feel like? Not a choice, or?
No, the drink felt like a choice, but it felt less linked to my body somehow. It felt less linked to, I'm going to pay for this tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then that changes in our lifetimes. You pay more as you get older. And as I got older, it was a higher cost. It sort of, I would say the juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
And that's what it came down to for me, is that juice wasn't worth the squeeze. The price I was paying trying to clear the toxins out of my body the next day in a body that doesn't clear toxins very well it was like, why am I doing this? I'm actually then choosing to really make this situation worse. It's like you're trying to heal and you're poisoning yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
That just doesn't,
yeah.
I couldn't square it. And yet, that consciousness probably started in the 2015 era.
Okay.
And I didn't have my last drink, or what was the last drink I've had, until 2017. And to some extent, I think it was the bit of the ritual, because the last drink that I had, I remember because we were in Iceland on an anniversary trip. My husband and I were on an anniversary trip. And I was like, I want to have a nice dinner. We're on holiday.
Yeah.
I had not had a drink for months prior, but I was like, let's just do it. And then sure enough, I really felt terrible the next day. And I was like, no, I just can't do it. But the yearning for let's be in ceremony and have this moment and mark the moment was still there. So it took me a little while to hear and acknowledge that this is probably not great. But yeah, I was still kind of like, elective pain. Let me choose.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose it anyway.
Yeah. You're like, I know it's going to feel like hell tomorrow, but here I go.
Yeah. And that, that could be food. That could be lots of different things. But it just became something that I didn't want to wake up and give my body that job to do of clearing out alcohol. So yeah, that's kind of where the turning point I think happened. I was like, I guess, listening to and starting to honor my body in a different way rather than override it. Because I'm sure my body was giving me all of those signals. I mean, a hangover is a clear signal. We just choose to, I chose to ignore it many times. And so there comes a point where I think my body was so loud and I was paying more attention to it in a different way that I'm like, okay, I'm kind of not honoring my body by making this choice.
Your body's like, hey, hello, hey, over here.
And getting louder.
Yeah, and like you said, that honoring your body in a way instead of overriding it, because I think we can sometimes just, okay, well, of course I'm gonna have a hangover. I drink too much. That's just the way it is. And then you're like, you stop and think it, your body's like, hey, I don't need that. Right. And so that
Yeah.
honoring of your body is,
Yeah.
especially for somebody, with an autoimmune disease who's like, it's hard enough, like you said, as it is, and then just compiling. And that can also go, even if you don't have an autoimmune, maybe there's other, mental
Yeah.
health, physical health, whatever that is, like it just compounds the work
Yeah.
you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's like it is that contraindicated, like it's
Yeah.
counterproductive. Like
Yeah.
there's, if you're actually, and I was, and continue to do a lot of self-awareness work and
Mhm.
healing work. And it's just a moment of kind of doing something that is intentionally against that and
Yeah.
not aligned in a way that I couldn't ignore after
Yeah.
a while.
And
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, because for me, when I had that moment of like, I want to be this person and I'm doing this person and that like doesn't work anymore. Like I can't do both. And do I pick me or like
Mm,
a glass of wine? Like which is it? Right. That to me felt, that's when my relationship shifted, and it felt empowering and of choice, and not that
mm,
I had to get sober because XYZ. So I'm curious if that
right.
was it for you. Did it feel a little bit more of choice? I mean, I know you had the physical piece.
Mm.
Was there any of that in your transition?
I think it felt like a declaration in some
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
And it was, I didn't feel the need to like make excuses for it. I was just like, yeah, I can't do it. Like it's
Uh,
too much, or I would just say, yeah, that juice isn't worth the squeeze. And then,
mhm.
when you're communicating that to other people, they're like, oh yeah, you're probably right. And you can
Yeah.
see the gears start to turn like, yeah, it's not
Mhm.
the same for me either.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of made
Mhm.
it like, yeah, this is a choice that
Yeah.
I've made, and I'm making it to honor myself in this way. And it just became like empowering, like you're saying. It
Mhm.
is a moment of kind of choosing you in a different
Mhm.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you were doing all the other things, right? Probably eating well, trying to sleep, all the things that we do. And then I know a lot of times what I was doing all the things I should be doing, but then having 2 glasses of wine at night. So it felt like it was just like, again,
Yeah.
counterintuitive to all the work I was doing.
Yeah. It's like, what does caring for yourself actually look like?
Ooh, that's good.
What does it actually look like? If
Yeah.
we took
Mm.
a step back, there are times when it can be undoing the things that you're trying to do for yourself. There are
Mhm.
times when it can be a form of self-harm, or self-sabotage, even the inner critics, all the things
Mhm.
that kind of come up.
Yeah.
Um, and if I zoomed out and said, what does caring for myself actually look like? Pretty sure like drinking a few bourbons
Yeah.
like is probably not high on the
Yeah.
list of like, yeah, that checks out. That
Yeah.
that definitely qualifies. So
Mhm.
um yeah, it's seeing it clearly. I think, also when I say seeing things clearly, like it's hard to see things clearly when you've got alcohol in the mix.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
I come from a mindfulness perspective with a long, 20, 30-year career in mindfulness. And
Mhm.
um, part of that is seeing things clearly,
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
paying attention on purpose,
Yeah.
without judgment. And so all of
Mhm.
that's part of this. And so if I zoom out and say, am I seeing this clearly? Or am I lying to myself?
Mhm.
It was easier to see it that way,
Yeah. Oh,
and make the choice.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, it's, maybe share, like, what was your upbringing like around alcohol? Was it something that was a part of your life? Like, what
Yeah.
was, because what was your childhood story or young adult story around
Yeah.
alcohol?
Yes. So I grew up in a household where alcohol was plentiful and present.
Mm. Mhm.
We had a separate beer fridge. We had a humongous built-in three-tier bar. I don't want to speak for all Italians, but I grew up in an Italian household. My grandparents had entire sets of glasses with their initials, carved into them, and a huge
Mhm.
bar. There was just a lot of booze all the
Mhm.
time, everywhere. So it was never taboo.
Okay.
So the good side of that, it was never taboo. It was always
Mhm.
around. It was never a like you can't have it. You could have it.
Yeah.
You could definitely have it as a kid. Um, the dark side to that is I come from a long line of alcoholics.
Mm.
So my father was an alcoholic, my grandfather was an alcoholic. Can't speak to the line before him, probably an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's the dark side of that equation was booze loomed large. And it was almost like another member of the family in
Mm.
some way. So I had my first drink when I was 7. I will never forget it
Mhm.
because my dad would have say, "You go get me a beer, and you can have a sip if you go get me the beer." So I'm just getting dad beers, and I'm
Yeah.
having sips of the beer as I'm bringing him the
Yeah.
beer, and I was 7, and so
Yeah.
it didn't take very long. And I remember it because it was pizza night, and I really wanted pizza,
Mm.
and I was drunk and could not
Mm.
see the pizza, like the room was
Oh.
spinning. And so,
Mm.
yeah, at 7 was the first time that I kind of remember the feeling of being drunk. And so, and it wasn't like, I mean, it was enabled
Yeah.
by my dad, right? By the family. So
Yeah.
not taboo, but almost just ever present and always around, and with lots and lots of easy access
Mhm.
to alcohol.
Looking back, like at 7, was that a scary moment for you? Or do you
I think I
remember
was
like what
very scared. Yeah.
Yeah,
At
yeah,
7, I was very scared. As a teenager, I got emboldened. So at
yeah.
7, I was scared. I
Yeah.
think I was probably 13, 14. I think I told my dad I could drink him under the table. I might have been 14, 15. And he said, okay, let's do it. I will go shot for shot with you. Get anything you want off the bar. And the
Mm.
list of things that I drank and mixed together at my young, ignorant age. And I got very sick,
Mm.
obviously. He did put on Hair, the musical, and Shot for Shot with me. And, it's like kind of comical, kind of sad, kind of scary, all
Yeah.
mixed in together.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was supposed to cheerlead a football game the next day. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and I got like super sick
yeah. Mhm.
and slept through it. The whole family showed up the next day, everyone kind of laughing,
Mhm.
about it. So it was one of those things where, like, if you want to drink, yeah, go ahead, let's do it. You want to drink here.
Mhm.
So on some level, it's like not making it taboo and something you have to rebel against. On another level, that's not really parenting. I don't think,
Yeah, yeah.
raised by wolves. And so, um,
It's like,
it,
"Ah."
but those
Yeah.
experiences, particularly the experience as a teenager, I kind of learned a little bit about the limitations. Like that taught me you know, and a thing about limitations and not wanting to
Mhm.
feel that way, not wanting to kind
Yeah,
of like get to the point of vomiting and feeling that sort of out of control feeling, and also
yeah.
watching my family. My father was a very abusive person, and so alcohol definitely was in the mix there. So I had this kind of like fear and respect. It's like the
Mm.
ocean, like I respect there are sharks in there and that is more powerful than me, and there was like something like that around alcohol for me, that
Mm.
I was aware that it was dangerous. Like it
Mm.
sort of planted this is dangerous, and it could lead into this place where you are out of control, or there's, violence tied to
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely sent me some clear messages.
Yeah, clear, but like a little bit of conflicting messages too, right? Because these are people you love, you probably saw it in the ritual,
Mm-hmm.
but also this, like, danger piece. So even at that young age, this conflicting, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, like, that, like, piece. What did that do for you when you, like, got out of your home and making decisions, like, as a young adult? Like, how did that transition to,
Yeah.
like, most people start drinking, the age of 20, 21 legally?
Yes. I'm trying to. I mean, I definitely drank a bit through high school,
Mhm.
and kind of into before
Yeah, yeah.
21. Um, a few moments of not being in control, but I think that it shaped. I would self-limit. I would kind of put guardrails in place, and I sort of learned to make sure I hit a cutoff point, because I just did not like the feeling of being out of control, which equated
Mhm.
to this like higher sense of danger, I think, for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but I was in bars and around, there wasn't, I didn't remove myself from those types of situations. I just sort of proceeded with caution, I suppose,
Mhm. Mhm.
in some way. And I was in a relationship that alcohol was used as a kind of a control mechanism for a while in my early
Mhm.
20s. And so I didn't drink for a really, really long time because it was sort of not allowed, if you will.
Mhm.
And I eventually did. And so, kind of like I had like a freshman year when I was in my 30s almost, when I got out of that
Yeah.
relationship, there was a little bit of kind of reclamation
Mhm.
of I can do what I want and not have to deal with other people's
Mhm.
opinions or thoughts. And so I definitely like went for it um, during that time frame, and made sure I, made up for a lost time.
Yeah.
But even in that mode where I was sort of like shedding the shackles, I guess, and I still had that little bit of, but be aware that this is dangerous. Be
Mhm.
aware that this could slip into a place. And I think on some level, coming from a line of alcoholics, I always worried that like, oh no, someday that's going to turn on and I'll be the alcoholic, like be
Mhm.
careful,
Yeah.
don't actually, like, this is like almost like a switch that could happen
Yeah.
any day, right? Be very
Yeah.
careful around it. So I think that informed my approach. I mean, not always,
Mhm.
because,
Mhm.
there's always that one extra drink where
Yeah.
there's not there's not logic that's happening at that point.
Yeah.
But for a large part of my approach to alcohol, even during my, freshman year of my 30s, I still maintained that sort of a little bit of like apprehension. Like, it was fun, let's have a good time, but be cautious. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of apprehension there.
That's interesting too. I love what you said about that, like that reclamation, like do what I want. And I'm curious if
Mm,
that's what a lot of people, maybe not at that, not extreme, maybe it's not coming out of something, but there is a sense like booze is something we can do. Feels a little edgy. It feels a little, even when we're grown up, it feels like something extra grown up to do. It feels like a treat, right? It's like something that we have control, that we can do what we want with it
yeah.
on a day to
Yeah.
day basis. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like your first car is your first apartment, right? And then
Yeah.
when you are able to do what you want out of your parents' home, then
Yeah.
that's almost like, if you haven't learned the lesson prior around your relationship with alcohol, then you kind of learn it then. A lot of people learn it in college.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it is a little bit of that asserting yourself, and
Yeah.
flashing forward to making the choice to not drink anymore is
Mhm.
also asserting myself in a different way.
Ooh,
So
yeah.
there's a similar theme there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When kind of talking about this flash forward, like, and, you said it was your health, but I also get this sense that it was like you were always kind of toying the line with alcohol, right? Like you're like, I'm going to go here, but not too far. You said you put those
Yeah.
guardrails up. What did you like? What kept on bringing you back to drinking before you said no?
Oh, I think there's definitely the social aspect of it. I think
Mhm.
the social aspect, um, I worked in design and tech, and it's a work hard, play hard type
Mhm.
environment. I think it's changed a little bit now, but in the time it was definitely a work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
And you'd be putting in all these extra hours, and then you'd go celebrate, let's
Yeah.
go to the bar. Or in one, job I had, they brought a drink cart to your desk, and just
Mm.
almost like an airplane, and
Yeah.
just, what would you like? So there was the environment, the culture was very like fun and loud and creative, and also very booze,
Mhm.
heavy, and which, you know, kind of checks out with how I was raised, right? It's very loud, and it's very like there's a lot of booze around, and we're having a good time. But
Yeah.
so it was like that was somewhat familiar to me, and it felt like
Mm.
being part of something.
Yeah.
and you'd have your one-on-ones in some cases at the bar with your manager. Like those types of moments.
Mhm.
So it felt like that social aspect, was pretty embedded in the
Yeah.
culture of design and tech. I don't think it's that way for all industries, but it certainly was for the one that I had chose at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like this, this rich, we kind of fast forwarded. Thank you for kind of sharing a little bit of your history, just because it's always
Yeah.
interesting to see what people decide to just transition out of. And it sounds like, you were good or bad, that awareness of like, oh, booze this is what it can do to you, really kind of had that warning. Like you said, you proceed with caution
Yeah.
until you really stepped into this declaration of this isn't the type of woman I am. And
Yeah.
this is what I want to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, also, let's not get it twisted. I like to be in control, and part of drinking too much means I would be out of control. So there's
Yeah.
that. There's that part too. There's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah, we all
that.
have a little. It's so funny. So, like, my brother, he was my very first guest. He's been sober for like 3 years now, I think. And, we were talking, and I'm like, I'm sober-ish. Like, that looks for me like one drink
Yeah.
every 30, 45-ish days, whatever, and it's funny. He's like, have you ever thought that maybe you want to be sober because you don't want to control and so nobody can tell you never drink again? I was like, maybe. So what? What if it is? What if it is? I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
baby steps, baby steps.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I really like the sober-ish idea too, because it's not, there's a declaration to an extent, but that doesn't mean I'm never going to drink again. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like people ask
Yeah.
me, "Are you
Yeah.
never going to drink again?" I'm like, "I don't know. Maybe."
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't honestly know if I will or if I won't.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to like hit a streak in a way that
Mm.
I know
Yeah,
it's really important. Some
yeah.
folks have a relationship with alcohol that means that is a thing that they need to uphold. I
Mhm.
don't have that relationship with
Yeah.
alcohol. Um, and so, it's like maybe I will, maybe I won't, but
Yeah.
I'm not putting a lot of extra pressure on it.
Mhm.
It's almost really simple. Like, just don't like how it feels in my body, and
Yeah.
maybe that'll change someday where it'll be more tolerable in my system, but right
Mhm.
now, that's not something I'm choosing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you talking about, rituals and social, it sounds like that was like that's really important to you and,
Mm,
that transition. So, like, currently in your friendships and your relationship, with your husband, like
yeah.
how have you kept that relationship or I'm sorry, that ritual and that social piece through your
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been a lot of social for me in the pandemic, so that kind of solves some of the
Mm.
problem for sure,
Yeah.
but not that it was a problem. I think, like, I met a friend for dinner a couple weeks ago, and I just said, the waiter came out, and I said, "Make me a mocktail, something citrus, go for it, get
Mhm.
creative." And then I just drink whatever comes, because
Yeah.
and I don't feel any way about, I think there was a point earlier in my journey where I felt like I was putting the bartenders were annoyed, and I'm like,
Mm.
"I don't care. I'm paying for this. Like, make something up, get creative, just take the booze out of it." And like, there
Yeah.
we go.
You're like, "I'll
It's
pay full price. I'll pay for my cocktail."
put it in a glass, like, we're good. It's a bit more, I don't have that kind of
Yeah.
weird apprehension around it. Like you said,
Mhm.
order it in the glass you want, right? Ask for what you want, basically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
so I don't, sometimes I will do that. Sometimes I'm just going to have water, and I'm totally fine with it. I don't feel any pressure. Um, I've never been like a people pleaser.
Mm.
So I don't feel that kind of extra pressure to conform or
Yeah.
like please other folks. I just do what I need to do. In terms of like my relationship, yeah, with my husband, you know, I think luckily for me, he has his own story and his own kind of journey with
Mm.
alcohol,
Mhm.
where he was like straight edge for many years, and his part of his family didn't drink at all, and so he had almost like a complete absence of alcohol, and so his
Mhm.
relationship started later, and so he doesn't have like any attachment to it really. I
Okay.
think that he was like a rebel not drinking when everyone around him was drinking, and so
Mm.
he doesn't have any, there's no pressure, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
There's no pressure from him. It's very casual. I think occasionally he says, "Are we ever gonna drink that limoncello we bought in Italy?" And I'm like, "I don't
Mhm.
know." Like, it's just sitting here. So there are definitely some of those
Yeah.
moments where we have, like, bottles of wine we bought on our honeymoon, or we have, some things that have, a significance because of the
Mhm.
event. And I think he would love to share that, and I would
Mhm.
too. And
Yeah.
um, so it's just sort of an open end right now of like, I
Yeah.
don't know, we maybe eventually, and
Yeah.
but so he'll have a drink and I'll have my mocktail or nothing, and it's
Mhm.
totally fine. Like there's really no pressure. It's very low key, and I approach it that way at home and if I'm out as well.
Yeah. And you're still able to have, like, that connection that is really what being that and that ritual, just it
Yeah.
looks a little different than maybe what society tells us it needs to look like.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pain in the ass to eat dinner with because I have a lot of food allergies, so that takes
Mhm.
more space than the than the drink part.
Yeah.
So that's a higher higher bar, higher hurdle, I think, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in the beginning I probably was less inclined to like go out after work with folks.
Mhm.
I think I kind of was like, I don't know. But I had to get over it because for me, this was my approach, and everyone is different. But for me, I was
Mhm.
like, look, I just get over it. Just go drink a, soda and lime and like
Yeah.
move on. Like go be social. If I wanted to be social in that way with people, then I had to sort of get over it and allow myself to be in that environment. I wasn't like tempted in that way,
Mhm.
but I knew that I wouldn't get that same kind of connection if I just kept like shutting myself away from it
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
work environment is so centered around booze that
Mhm.
it's, I don't know, you can't really get away from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I just made a decision to make the choice to drink whatever it was that I was going to drink and, be in the environment and be around people and be social and or go to dinner and it's not a thing. Like if you're
Yeah.
having dinner with somebody and they really care about the fact that you're not drinking, you might want to look at that
Yeah.
individual and their place in your
Yeah.
life.
For sure. Well,
Yeah.
and I love this thought of, you had said even like mindfulness has been a big, big part of your life. You said like 30 years, right? So even as like a young person to where you're at today,
Yeah.
how much of that might, starting here and then, current time, but how much do you think that like inner knowing, that mindfulness
Mm.
helped you not go past that wall or past that barrier?
Yeah, I think it's it's so easy to there's a with booze there's a lot of messaging coming at us. And whether it's from our upbringing, like in my case and everybody's case, or some relationship or some slot that alcohol fits into,
Mhm.
whether you're for it or against it or whatever your upbringing. And so there's a messaging there that's kind of written onto us. And then
Mhm.
there's society and culture, which is telling us who you'll be if you drink this beer or whatever. Like there's a lot of messaging coming at us at all times in movies.
Mhm.
And, so we're kind of bombarded with messages from the outside in of who you should be in relationship to
Mhm.
alcohol, that we can just replace our own feelings and thoughts with all of that, right? We don't actually have to think about it. We don't actually have to feel into what is this for me.
Mm.
And so I think from a mindfulness perspective, my relationship is about tuning into my body and tuning into insourcing instead of outsourcing, right? I can
Mhm.
outsource my thoughts and feelings and opinions on anything if I just
Yeah.
let the outside world tell me what I should think and what I should feel and who I should be.
Yeah.
So cutting through that noise and sort of tuning in to the internal signal of, well, is that true?
Mhm.
Whatever it is that you're believing at that moment, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it wise?
Mhm.
Um, what is this for me,
Yeah.
truly? And so I was allowing the signal to kind of come from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. And
Mm.
that
Mhm.
sometimes means you're swimming upstream
Mhm.
because everything around us is going to give us a message to consume.
Yeah.
And your body and all the different parts of you, mind, body, spirit, emotions, whatever, might give you a different answer if you just
Mhm.
asked.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's the reckoning of kind of the loudness, like my body got very loud with me when I wasn't listening.
Mm-hmm.
And mindfulness helped me turn towards that instead of away from it.
Yeah.
So I could continue to override or ignore it if I wasn't being mindful, but if I was taking a moment with myself and
Mm-hmm.
actually turning towards this discomfort, because it's
Mm-hmm.
discomfort
Yeah.
or fear, what does it have to say to me? What
Yeah.
is there?
And thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. And
Yeah.
that input versus output, that I think that, and then also doing so with like no judgment, right? Because we like to do
Mm.
that judgment to be like, oh, this is what my body is telling me. And I think what you had said earlier, you said, and I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong on those dates, right? Like around 2015, you were like, this isn't working as much. It was like 2 years till you took till you kind of,
Yeah,
so it's
that's
like,
a long
okay,
conversation.
yeah. Well, I mean, for me,
Internal.
it was probably like, I say I had a whisper, right? Until it was
Yeah.
screaming. And then I was
Yeah.
like, you've got to listen to yourself. And I
Right.
mean, that was like probably 10 years. So you beat me at this, but just kind of recognizing that people are listening, like it's a journey, right? Like it is
Of
not
course.
even when and you're a mindfulness, coach and, do somatic healing, I do coaching, like we're even in that work. And it's still,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as you said, it's such a culture, society, hot topic, so many messages. Like this can be something that takes a while to
Mm-hmm.
truly work through for some people.
It's a long journey, or can be, doesn't have to
Mhm.
always be, but it can
Yeah.
be a long journey, but the journey to me is about self-awareness.
Mhm.
It's getting to know yourself and
Yeah.
understand what's there, without all these extra layers of shoulds. I say,
Mhm.
don't should on yourself. Like there's lots of things that you should do, that society will tell you you should do.
Yeah.
But what is that for you?
Yeah.
And so it's hard work to sit with your own shit. It's hard work to be
Totally.
willing to sit there and go, I don't think this is working for me, but I might still choose to do it. And then
Yeah.
not beat the shit out of yourself after
Mhm.
you make
Mhm.
that choice,
Yeah.
because you had a moment of awareness. And that one moment of awareness of listening, of turning towards it, you were listening, you were present in
Mhm.
that one moment. That's enough to start.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
maybe there'll be another moment and it'll make it a little bit bigger next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the willingness to sit with your own shit.
Mm. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and how do you if somebody was listening, like
Mm.
it's coaching, we don't really give advice a lot, but what's something that's worked for you
Mm.
to increase your own self-awareness?
Uh, I mean, for me, I realized that there's just not shortcuts. And
Mhm.
I don't know if that's helpful, but it's understanding like whether you're reaching for a cookie or, a glass of wine, it's like, why?
Yeah.
What's happening right now
Mhm.
that you want to reach for that? And just to have a moment of being able to see it doesn't mean you're not going to reach for the wine or the cookie,
Yeah.
like you do
Yeah,
you, right?
absolutely.
Like that's,
Yeah.
but just to have that momentary check-in so that becomes more of a conscious choice.
Mhm.
A choice point, like I had mentioned before, becomes a conscious choice as opposed to an automatic choice,
Mhm.
as a default. We just are doing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so if we can insert like a moment of like a mindful gap, a pause,
Mhm.
just a
Mhm.
pause, as brief as it can be, to
Yeah.
check in for that moment and then proceed from
Yeah.
there. It might give you more information to work with.
Yeah.
It may be quiet in the beginning,
Mhm.
and you may override it or whatever, right? And that's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, but to just sort of allow yourself to have a moment where you can pause and check before we kind of proceed.
Mm.
It's
Yes, that
Yeah,
pause. Yeah.
the pause.
Well, What I'm sensing too, and I'm in total agreement, is it's also like it's like data. We're just collecting data as we're going in, right? Like I'm going to the fridge for the 10th time to look in to grab a little cookie dough or whatever it is. I don't do that
Yeah.
because I don't keep cookie dough in my house because I would do that.
Oh yeah. No, I
It's
can't. I
like
don't pass the cookie test. I can keep
yeah,
booze
I'm
in the
like
house.
I
I
don't
can't keep cookies.
just maybe I just know myself and know that I will
Yeah.
eat them like quickly. But I'm just yeah, you go in and you're like, that's interesting. Okay, I'm frustrated or I'm annoyed. Okay, I still have
Hmm.
that. And it's like you said that you just slowly, and then all of a sudden you're like, I do that all the time. But creating
Hmm.
that space and just that check in and showing yourself the grace and just choosing, like, I'm just going to collect data on why I keep on having that glass of wine every single night or why I
Yeah.
keep on overeating or consuming too much social media or keep on, in a relationship I shouldn't, whatever your thing
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that just awareness piece. And like you said, you may pass it up for months or years, like myself, right? Like
Hmm.
it's fine. It's fine because, when we're shifting, it's that identity shift. You're leaving a part of you
Oh
behind.
yeah.
Like it's not just
100%. Who am I without it?
right. Like, what do I tell my friends now if we're going out?
Hmm.
Like, and also for me is I've even like had a little bit of like, oh my God, did I just waste like so many years of my life just over drinking? Right? Those moments that you look back.
Yeah.
But just showing yourself grace in all of this. Sorry, I got like derailed a little, but
No,
that
but
piece
it's
of
true.
self-awareness.
And presence. Like we do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things automatically.
Yeah.
And you can drive somewhere and not remember one thing about the journey because it's very automatic. And
Yeah.
so, this sort of moment of waking up and coming into presence,
Mm-hmm.
a simple exercise, just a mindfulness thing is most people have a electric toothbrush with like a 2 minute
Mm-hmm.
timer, and it usually buzzes every 30 seconds to remind you to move around your mouth. That's a great one. Start with that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
are you present? Where'd you go? Because you're probably making grocery lists, thinking about the day.
Oh, yeah.
We are in those 2 minutes a million places of
Mm-hmm.
brushing our teeth. And like, what does it mean to actually practice to build that?
Yeah.
You're building a muscle. You're building
Mm-hmm.
a muscle of presence. You're building a muscle of
Yeah.
self-awareness that you can then apply to anything. And like you said, you get the
Mhm.
data of, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that this is how I felt about when I reached for the wine,
Yeah.
right? I didn't even
Yeah.
know that that was there, but just that building that skill of kind of tuning into
Mhm.
yourself for brief little
Yeah.
moments, you start to get new pieces of information.
Oh, and those brief little moments are wins, right? It's like if I'll do like a 5-minute breath work, kind of like slow meditation. And I swear, like half the time I like look at my phone, I'm like, it's been 24 seconds. But just that like slow build, right? And like I love that is thank you for sharing. That's a great example with your toothbrush. Just practice then and that
Yeah.
presence. And maybe if you are listening and you're somebody that's, sober curious or like, I don't know, like that's a great exercise to just say, okay, why do I want this glass of wine? What else is going on underneath?
Yeah.
Is it that I have had a bad day? Am I emotional? Or am I just wanting to have a glass with my
Yeah.
spouse?
Just want
And
it.
then
But know that you
what are the
want it,
repercussions? Right?
right? Like
Yeah.
it's okay to want
Mhm.
it, but know that you
Yeah.
want it,
Yes.
right?
Don't just do it just
Yeah,
because.
don't just do it. And so, you can treat every drink that you do have as a mindfulness practice. You can take the
Mhm.
time, right? It's sober-ish, right? So folks
Yeah.
are yeah, take the time with your in 45 days or whenever your next drink is, like
Yeah.
take the time and slowly like
Mm.
smell the drink.
Yeah.
Like hold the sensation of the glass in your hand. Like slow it way down and
Mhm.
use all your senses and see what new information you get from that. So there's
Mm.
like, even a mindful
Yeah.
experience of having a drink will shift things and give you new information and kind of you may see what you see in that, I guess.
Ah,
Maybe a
April,
different
I love
experience.
that. I love it because I remember when I towards the end before I kind of, shifted everything is like I was just assuming every night I would have a glass of wine and then I would have 2. And I remember like 9 times out of 10, that second glass, I was like, "Eh," but I would finish it.
Mm,
It was
right.
like interesting, but it's that mindfulness piece, right? It was just a habit. But thank you. I love that idea of like
Yeah.
really sitting in with that glass. And now when I do have glass, it's usually just one. But even slowing down more, I think would be a fun. data experiment for me.
Yeah, exactly. Like it may taste different. It may be a different experience if you
Yeah.
actually kind of pay attention on purpose
Mm, yeah.
without judgment to that drink. And
Mm-hmm.
what do you notice from there? And that's just like, who knows, right? I don't know what
Yeah.
you'll notice, but it'll be
Yeah.
fun to find out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tell me a little bit and then we'll kind of wrap up. You do somatic healing,
Mhm.
which is really kind of staying in tune with your body. Correct me, is that correct? And like what you need physically? Is that
Yeah,
maybe share
somatic.
with me?
Okay, so somatic's a bit hard to describe, but soma is your body.
Mhm.
And so at a meta level, the body has a lot of information.
Mm.
And we often, especially in the Western culture, favor the mind, right? We
Mhm.
think that our body is just carrying our head around.
Oh, we do.
And yeah, just carrying my head around from room to room. And this is what's in charge. And everything
Mm.
from here down,
Mhm.
it's like this is the engine and it's just the rest of the car. And from a somatic perspective, it's really saying there's a lot of information and intelligence and wisdom that already exists in your body, and your
Mhm.
body knows what to do. If we were in charge of breathing, we'd all be dead
Yeah.
because we'd be overthinking, overthinking every breath. We wouldn't make it. So it's good that we're not in charge of it.
Yeah.
But we don't want to discount what's naturally already there as an embodied human being. And
Mhm.
so the mindfulness pause, can work in concert with the sort of what do you notice in your body?
Mhm.
What do you notice? And people might notice different things, colors, sensations, temperatures, different images might come to mind. Well, where do you notice it? And is that spreading? So I primarily the work I've been trained in is somatic experiencing, which is really a trauma-based healing
Mhm.
modality for kind of releasing or helping to complete the cycles of thwarted defensive strategies in the body. So
Mhm.
could be a car accident as an example of like a shock trauma, and
Okay.
the body may brace and it never really gets to complete the defense of
Mhm.
getting out of the
Mhm.
way because you got hit by the other car. So it's really tapping into the body's wisdom, and the body has a lot of wisdom and we
Mm.
tend to ignore it. So you can use that from, the conversation we're having of
Yeah.
really tapping in is what helped me understand and honor my body, that if I'm tuning into the wisdom of my body doesn't want this.
Mhm.
My mind is overriding my body and maybe I should stop that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's understanding that we are embodied sensory beings and that there's more to us than just our
Mm.
cognitive high brains, which are great, but can really get in the way.
Every time.
Can really get in the way when we're not trying to like
Yeah.
solve problems.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you for sharing more about that. And I think it's that, like you said, your body knew, my body knew, my brain complicated it, right? Sometimes it's
right.
really, really simple what we know we need to do.
Yeah.
Especially that piece.
And to
Yeah.
tune into more, right? Like we know what I often work with clients and I ask them to tune into their mind, their body, their emotions or heart, and then
Mm.
their spirit, something bigger than them. And if
Mhm.
you just do that simple kind of, it's not a checklist, but check in,
Yeah. Mhm.
we usually know what the mind's going to say. Like that's loud and proud and
Yeah.
large and in charge, and we know what's
Yeah.
happening. But very rarely do we think to pause and say, what does my body want right now?
Mm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
wait to see what, you may not get an answer right away when you start asking the question, but ask it anyway
Yeah.
and see what eventually comes forth because something will.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. I love that what I'm hearing from you is my takeaways from this episode is really kind of that self-awareness and those just little questions just to like start out, right? You may have to ask yourself that question thousands of times and that's okay. That's the way it's
Yeah.
supposed to be. But just kind of showing yourself grace, but that check in with your body, that check in with ourselves with that self-awareness, and how much that can really transform.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
my last question before we wrap up is what does soberish mean to you?
Yeah. I really love this term. um, I think for me, soberish is, yeah, I don't want to beat that horse, but it really is like checking in and
Mm-hmm.
this making that decision from the inside out
Yeah.
about, whether it's, drinking or something else, because there could be other things that
Mm-hmm.
um, folks slot into that, sober category.
Mm-hmm.
So giving yourself the compassion at any moment. So I think that's what it is for me, like checking in, tuning in, and seeing what comes up as the
Mm.
answer.
Love it. Thank you. I
Thank
will put
you.
how to get a hold of you in the show notes for the amazing work you do. And thank you for sharing your story, your insight, your gifts to inspire those who are on the fence what life can look like choosing to be soberish.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me and for this
Yes.
beautiful work and
Mhm.
offering into the world that you are
Mhm.
giving all of us.
Thank you. I received that. So, thank you for tuning into this episode. Please share with anybody that is sober curious or would like to learn more about Soberish Uprising. And remember, it's not about saying no to booze, it's about saying yes to you.